It is not every day that you see a guy shot out of a cannon. But a few summers ago, I did just that, not once or even twice, but some 30 times. I was in Montreal during the Just for Laughs festival, and the place where I was staying had a perfect view 3 times a day for 10 days in a row to see a man shot from a human cannon some 5 meters long. Now, when I made my reservation for this place, I had no idea that this peculiar ritual unfolding outside my window would become a significant part of my stay. But unfold it did. And try as I might, I could not avert my eyes. Curiosity got the best of me every single time. It always started in the same way. The growing buzz of the gathering crowd outside would serve as my cue to move to the window. With much fanfare, the man in his shiny red spandex suit would bid the crowd farewell, and then with a wave disappear into the depths of the cannon. A few seconds later, when he was ready for blastoff, the countdown would begin. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then poof, out of a big boom and an impressive puff of smoke, the man would sail some 50 meters through the air before landing in the safety of a small net. As he hit the net, with a flourish of golden fireworks, the crowd would go wild. The daredevil would then heave himself over the edge of the net, and before taking a bow to acknowledge the crowd's applause, would drop to his knees and kiss the ground as though he had just made it back from the moon. It was quite something to see, and it was certainly something to have seen it more than once. In ways that surprise me still, it became an important part of my summertime spiritual practice that year, an invitation issued 3 times a day to contemplate matters of life and death, of wisdom and folly. It wasn't long before I started to wonder just how this guy got this job. I found myself curious about what was listed on his resume. Did he actually put down as his profession human cannonball? And where exactly did he ever get the needed experience to say that this is what he did professionally? How much practice does it take before one can climb into a cannon with a complete sense of confidence? Can you imagine how steep his learning curve must have been? Can you imagine how hard it was to get that kind of experience? No wonder he was so quick to kiss the ground. And yet, haven't we all been there? As outlandish as it might seem to put ourselves in his shoes, haven't we all found ourselves at some point careening out of a cannon, just hoping that there is a net out there somewhere and praying that it holds? Haven't we all gained much of our life experience while flying by the seat of our pants? I'm reminded of that sage old saying that experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. By that definition, the human experience comes with a fair bit of disappointment and heartache, even as we gain in knowledge and grow in wisdom. Even with things going precisely our way, experience often turns out to be less than we had hoped, and sometimes more than we ever bargained for. It frequently comes with scrapes and cuts and bruises, and sometimes even worse. Some of us have more than our fair share of scars. Getting the experience we want and need, as well as the experience that we don't, tests our mettle and tests our resolve. And yet all of it, the good, the bad, and everything in between, is our life. All of it is the stuff from which a life is made. It doesn't mean that it's easy, that it all makes sense, or that it comes without some hefty regrets. Of course, making mistakes is part of the game and arguably the quickest way to finding wisdom. Nothing ushers in wisdom like an experience that we never want to repeat. Once upon a time, a genie appeared at a university faculty meeting and told the dean that in return for his unselfish and exemplary behavior, he would be rewarded with his choice of either infinite wealth, wisdom, or beauty. Without hesitating, the dean asked for infinite wisdom. "Done," said the genie before disappearing in a cloud of smoke and a bolt of lightning. Dumbstruck, all of the heads in the room turned towards the dean, who sat surrounded in a faint halo of light. At length, one of his colleagues whispered, "Say something." The dean then looked at them all and said, "I should have taken the money." Experience is indeed what we get when we don't get what we want. The gift of hindsight is sometimes bittersweet. How often we hear people say, "If I had it to do over again." Usually, though, when people say those words, they're pointing to a specific lesson learned, an understanding of how they would handle some situation differently if given the chance. But rarely have I ever heard someone say they would really want to live their entire lives over again, especially without the benefit of knowing what they have already learned the hard way this time, without the hard-won wisdom that has carried them this far. Can you imagine going back to square one and starting from scratch? Sure, it might be nice to have an extra shot at life, but would you be willing to give up the wisdom life has already given you, only to experience the hard lessons that went with it all over again? I'm not sure I would. I'm not so sure that I would push my luck. As wild and hard and beautiful as this time through life has been, I can't quite imagine a second round. In the words of the Humanist Manifesto, this life, especially when we are able to live out our full years, is all and enough. I love the way that Theodore Levitt speaks to all of this. Experience, he says, comes from what we have done, and wisdom comes from what we have done badly. I don't know about you, but I have had to make some epic mistakes to have whatever wisdom I have amassed in this life. And as painful as it has sometimes been, I can't imagine trading any of it for a second chance. When I look to the path my life has taken, I find I cherish all of it in some odd way. Perhaps because I simply can't imagine who I would be had life not unfolded as it has. All of the disappointment and the devastation and the heartbreak I have known has had a hand in shaping me, most often for the better. Barbara Brown Taylor, in reflecting on the mixed blessings in her own life, writes, "In my life, I have lost my way more times than I can count. I have set out to be married and ended up divorced. I have set out to be healthy and ended up sick. When I was 30, I set out to be a parish priest, planning to spend the rest of my life caring for souls in any congregation that would have me. Almost 30 years later, I teach school. While none of these displacements was pleasant at first, I would not give a single one of them back. I have found things while I was lost that I might never have discovered if I had stayed on the path. I have lived through parts of my life that no one in her right mind would ever willingly have chosen, finding enough overlooked treasure in them to outweigh my projected wages in the life that I had planned." I think Taylor's words, more than any I know, point to what it means to truly see, in the immortal words of Joni Mitchell, both sides now, to glimpse the start of the many other possible paths your life might have taken, but to embrace the meandering path that you're on, knowing that it is yours and yours alone, and that its many detours, smooth spots, and rough patches are what make up the substance of your days on this earth, and are the source of the wisdom and experience that you have carved out of being alive. Toward the end of his life in 1960, the Broadway lyricist Oscar Hammerstein got at this with great eloquence when he described why he considered himself to be a happy man, using words that are as eerily apt today as they were some 6 decades ago when he penned them. "Why do I believe I am happy? Death has deprived me of many whom I loved. Dismal failure has followed many of my most earnest efforts. People have disappointed me. I have disappointed them. I have disappointed myself. Further than this, I am aware that I live under a cloud of international chaos. The cloud could burst, and a rain of atom bombs could destroy millions of lives, including my own. From all this evidence, could I not build up a strong case to prove why I am not happy at all? I could, but it would be a false picture, as false as if it were to describe a tree only as it looks in winter. I would be leaving out a list of people I love who have not died. I would be leaving out an acknowledgement of the many successes that have sprouted among my many failures. I would be leaving out the blessing of good health, the joy of walking in the sunshine. I would be leaving out my faith that the goodness in humanity will triumph eventually over the evil that causes war. The conflict of good and bad merges in thick entanglement. You cannot isolate virtue and beauty and success and laughter and keep them from all contact with wickedness and ugliness and failure and weeping. I don't believe, he says, anyone can enjoy living in this world without accepting its imperfections. We must know and admit that we are imperfect, that all other mortals are imperfect, and go on in our own imperfect way, making mistakes and writing out the rough and bewildering, exciting, and beautiful storm of life until the day we die. I don't know if Hammerstein was a Unitarian, but with ideas like that, he certainly could have been. Since the middle of the 19th century, Unitarianism has held up the belief that we are saved not by faith, by grace, or by good works, but by the growth and development of our own character. William Ellery Channing, who articulated this idea of salvation by character, believed that our great task on this earth was to commit ourselves to what he called self-culture. He believed that by cultivating the self, we worked out our own salvation by caring for ourselves and dedicating our energies to the unfolding and the perfection of our nature. Now, salvation by character involves two important tools, self-searching and self-forming. To Channing, this meant we must make a careful study of our lives, looking at those corners of our souls that need improvement, and then making an intentional move toward our continued growth and spiritual development. While this may now seem the obvious stuff found in the self-help aisle of any modern bookstore, it was a radical proposition back in 1843. The prevailing religious views in North America at that time championed dramatic conversion experiences that changed people's hearts and minds in an instant, rather than the slow and steady, self-managed progress toward wisdom and goodness. That slow and steady work, as much today as it was generations ago, is the project at the heart of being a Unitarian Universalist. To do this, as humans always have, we have to work with what we've got. In his essay, Self-Culture, Channing wrote, "We pine for a sheltered lot, for a smooth path, for cheering friends and unbroken success. But Providence ordains storms, disaster, hostilities, suffering. And the great question, whether we shall live to any purpose or not, whether we shall grow strong in mind and heart, depends on nothing so much as on our use of these diverse circumstances." Dearly beloved, we are called to look at our lives from all sides, to cultivate from the diverse circumstances of our days wisdom and experience that leads on to our own growth and the betterment of the world around us. May we, with every fiber of our being, commit ourselves each day to the work of love and justice to which this great faith calls us. Blessed be.